Your movie for today's experiment makes even me sick, and I like Morgan Stewart's Coming Home. It's called Killer Shrews, and it stars James Best from Dukes of Hazzard fame.
This time, we watched Season 4, Episode 7, The Killer Shrews, with the short Junior Rodeo Daredevils.
In tonight's performance, the Killer Shrews will be played by Fido, Rover, and Shep. Good boys.
But first, Chris, do we have some follow-up?
We don't have follow-up because we just released the last episode this morning as we're recording today, but we do have some follow-up in that I'm going to follow up that Breath of the Wild 2, Tears of the Kingdom, is quite good from the first hour. Why are we recording on Zelda Day?
I don't know. You're the one who was like, I don't know, maybe Friday? No, I was the one who said Friday, and you were like, sure.
Your schedule is the one that's very busy. I agree to it because I'm nice, but oh boy, has Zelda 2 fever hit your household?
No, not yet. We're still waiting for it to be delivered because my household wanted to actually have the card instead of doing a digital download. We're always concerned about memory on our Switch for some reason. I don't know.
The Switch doesn't come with a lot of memory, but
no.
If you get an SD card, you can really... But that doesn't matter. Point is, I downloaded a digital version, and 4 minutes after midnight, I tested several times. It finally unlocked, and I was able to play a little bit of the new Zelda game, and I was very happy. I'm enjoying it so far. I'm only 2 shrines in to the tutorial level.
Wow.
So, who knows what's going to happen, but I'm liking it. It's so weird to be playing a Zelda game, like a Breath of the Wild style game, and not have any clue where anything is or what I'm supposed to do. Because I've played through Breath of the Wild several times.
Oh, yeah, of course you did. My household is like all aflutter, and the residents of my household have all like coordinated with everyone we know in the neighborhood to try and descend on our house this afternoon and play simultaneously so that they can talk to each other while they are playing. So that is the plan for today in my household. Once, fingers crossed that the physical copy arrives in time for members of my household to be able to play with everyone who has a digital download. We'll see.
Well, listeners, we're not going to linger on this too much, and I'm sure I won't give updates, but I hope you're enjoying it. And if you are, write in, but no spoilers, please. Thank you.
No spoilers!
But, okay, people didn't listen to this podcast in order to hear about Zelda. They listened to hear about Junior Rodeos and Killer Shrews.
I mean, this is the unequivocal #1 podcast for shrews, obviously, right?
Well, I'll tell you all about all the various shrew podcast options when we get to that. But let's remind people what happens in this episode.
Okay.
This time, we watched Season 4, Episode 7, The Killer Shrews.
But first, a short called Junior Rodeo Daredevils. It might have started as kids just being kids, but that old-timer Billy Slater's got other plans. He's got a hanging tree for those who mess with him, or worse, mess with horses. Or maybe he can bury those kids up to their necks, Motel Hell style, but instead he treats the whole town to a reckless display of child endangerment, otherwise known as a rodeo. Not only must these children perform in the rodeo, they also have to organize it and promote it. Yes, that kind of work will teach the children. You do not mess with the old-timers. So, a load of horses, ropes, bulls, and riding are about to unfold. These kids race each other, and they ride each other's bulls and drag each other's horses along and do some calf roping. Rodeo stuff. Yep. Old-timer Billy Slater's really doing a job on those kids, and the crowd goes wild. Yay! The end.
And now for our feature presentation, The Killer Shrews. Captain Thorne and First Mate Rook are making a supply delivery to a secluded island where a scientist, Marlowe Craigus, has set up a little laboratory. But wouldn't you know it, a hurricane is coming that night. Rook is going to stay on the boat because that seems like a good idea in a hurricane, and Thorn ends up staying with Kragus and his team. Things are a little rough on the island, their communication systems are broken down, but hey, there's vast amounts of alcohol in the house, so everyone always has a little drink in their hand. Oh, but there's another problem. You see, the scientists on this island have kind of a fun project. You know how little creatures have high metabolisms and short lifespans? What if you could genetically modify a creature so that it was smaller, but had a slow metabolism? Wouldn't it then have a longer lifespan? And wouldn't tiny, half-sized, genetically modified, long-lived humans be the best way to deal with our overpopulation crisis? Anyway, they aren't quite there in the research yet, but they have managed to make giant bloodthirsty shrews. Oh, and also they left out some poison recently to try to deal with all the giant shrews, but the poison didn't kill the shrews, it just made them into giant, bloodthirsty, venomous shrews. Why, now a little scratch is enough to kill a person. Well, anyway, the shrews only come out at night, so as long as everybody stays in the house at night, everything will be fine. Except the house is made out of adobe, and the hurricane will soften the adobe and make it easy for the shrews to claw their way inside. Well, tensions run high throughout the night, not helped when a love triangle emerges between Captain Thorn, a research assistant named Jerry, and the lead scientist's daughter, Anne, who I guess is supposed to be engaged to Jerry. Anyway, while all that's happening, a few shrews do manage to dig their way into the house and kill off several minor characters. What to do? Well, when morning comes, and the calm of the eye of the hurricane, our heroes will find a few metal barrels and put them over their heads, using them as armor as they waddle out to the shore. Only Captain Thorn, daughter Anne, and Father Marlowe will survive the night, but they do manage to swim out to the boat. And as Thorn and Anne embrace, Thorn declares that he's not going to worry about overpopulating the earth for a while, if you know what I mean. The end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, hey everybody, it's present time! GPC is so excited to get a Little Mermaid Under the Sea set. Tom gets a sweet car with sweet tunes, and Crow gets sensible dress slacks from JCPenney. One of these things is not like the others. Invention exchange to enact revenge on the many, many bullying events and terrorizing they received from puny mortals in school. And in school, the Mads have invented a machine that will cleave the earth in two. Mwahaha! Joel and the bots have Jim Henson's Edgar Winter babies, which, of course, means we'll call this exchange a draw. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. At the break in the movie, Joel convinces the bots that a Will Rogers sketch will be great, and maybe he's the one who crawled into the wrong end of the Cracker Barrel. Then again, Crow as a cow with enormous horns is really adorable with his mooing and such, and Tom just bristles in the most adorable way as a cactus. So if Joel wants to do a Will Rogers sketch, I'm all in. And if that sketch becomes a string of silly known quotes after silly known quotes while Crow wears sensible pants and Tom is sharp, yep, still in. Killer Shrew, Killer Shrew. It's the enticing jingle and the fabulous board game. Pick a card, any card. Turns out, no matter what you pick, you don't move. No one moves. Nothing happens. Will this break our bots? Can they make it through a movie this bad? Well, Joel's got us, so we're okay. We can get back into that theater and mock this honk shoe movie. Speaking of drinks, I think we've found a place where everyone knows our name, and we can order a Killer Shrew. Combine Mr. Pibb, Captain Crunch with Crunch Berries, peanut M&Ms, marshmallow peeps, blend. What a delicacy. What a sugar rush. Woo! And we close with Shrew sketch. GPC, Crow, and Tom are all dressed as shrews. They have bitten Joel, and he is slowly dying while reading letters and typing out his last symptoms, just like the doctor in the movie. Ning, 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 ning. TV's Frank has had one too many killer shrews, and now he has a bellyache. But Dr. F has the cure for that. Ipecac! Ning, 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 ning. What do you think, sirs?
As somebody who grew up getting a lot of pairs of sensible slacks at JCPenney's, there was a real haunting trauma to this episode.
Did you also get a pullover and some orthopedic shoes to match?
No. Happily, I guess. I never needed orthopedic shoes, and I guess I got a pullover once or twice, but I really remember the slacks. It really was like slacks. I mean, I was also kind of tall, and there weren't a lot of slacks that fit very well, and just going to get pants for me was very difficult and a long process, and I didn't like it, and it was boring, and JCPenney smelled weird, and I didn't care for any of it.
But that doesn't sound like a gift. That sounds like shopping for school in the beginning of the year. It sounds like it would have been impossible for somebody to get those slacks for you.
Yes, no, that is true. That wasn't a gift. Gifts were things like socks.
Ooh, wow.
Which now I like. I like a fun pair of socks as a gift. They're great.
Oh, yeah, but now you get fun socks as a gift. You don't get, like, tube socks or something.
Yeah, they only had tube socks with stripes in it when I was a kid, and they're not fun.
Well, if you're a hipster, they're fun, Chris. Come on. All the hipsters wear tube socks with stripes.
Yeah, and I know some people take a very special adult fun in them, but no, it wasn't what I was into at the time or now.
Yeah, fair enough.
Anyway,
No.
How did you enjoy this episode? Had you seen it before?
I have totally seen it before, and I think I've seen it with you because I entirely remember the Junior Rodeo Daredevils with and the crowd goes wild. Yay! Yeah. Totally remember that. And I remember the Killer Shrews. I didn't remember so much drinking in the Killer Shrews, though. But I totally remembered those dogs. Those dogs that are basically just in like a shaggy snuffleupagus costume and running around after everybody. That was fabulous. And the puppet faces with the long teeth that are just like gnawing on the side of everything.
Yeah.
That was so much fun.
That is the reason that you watch this episode, I suppose. The short, absolutely remember the short. I've seen it many times. I think I've seen it in other contexts, maybe in the shorts compilations that they've made.
Oh, yeah.
The movie, I'm a little surprised that I had watched this with you at some point, although it's entirely possible, because I remember finding this episode a little bit difficult to watch.
Oh.
The movie is very boring, very dark, and it's very hard to hear what anyone's saying.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have subtitles when I was watching it back in the day. So even the somewhat incorrect subtitles that we can get now from the Gizmoplex, we didn't have that. It was all very, very tricky.
It was very silly. I have to say, one of the times that I watched this, I didn't watch it. I listened to it in my car on the commute. And It was still entertaining. Like, the riffs are lots of fun. The movie visually's got nothing going for it other than the shaggy dogs and the teeth faces, you know? But, like that riffing, they had a really good time with it.
No, that's the thing that I realized on this watch is that the riffing is very solid. I don't know if this is such a great movie for MST3K, but they do as good a job as you can in this season 4 episode. It's pretty entertaining if you can handle the movie.
Yeah. Like the scene where they're just like, oh, well, another actor just walked in the room, so I think I have to leave. Only 2 persons per scene. Like, there's so much stuff like that. And the house that they're in is just so dull and boring, and they never leave it. They don't even walk around on the island all that much. Like, why not? You have that location. You had it during the day. And, then the Killer Shrews, like, ate. The only person of color in the whole movie. Oh, no, both of them, actually. Yay!
Yeah. Yeah.
Come on!
I mean, they ate other people as well, but
True.
Definitely the first one to get eaten was the African-American guy.
Who plays Dixieland jazz on his banjo. But we never get to hear it. Why not, Chris? Why not?
They couldn't get the rights.
Well, there you go. Oh, man.
He does get the first line in the movie, which I'm sure he was happy about.
Yeah?
I'm sure that was very meaningful for him.
Well, and he seems to be one of the only characters that actually has like a connection with another person. Everybody else just seems so dry and isolated, like they don't seem to make relationships with each other. But I think Rook is the only character that really does sell having a connection or a relationship with any other person inside of this movie.
Yeah, or a personality.
Yeah. What is up with that?
I don't know.
It is a really boring looking movie, but the riffs are lots of fun. Joel is right. They really were just kind of killing it in there.
Yeah. Sketches were pretty good too. What did you think of the cocktail that they made?
I would never want to drink it. How about you?
It looked very sweet, as you described the Killer Shrew, with having nothing but candy in it. Of course, TV's Frank loves it.
Of course. How did they get it to him, or was he just making it on his own? This is not when they have the umbilical cord or whatever connecting them, right? That's way later.
No, this is before the umbilicus happened, but let's assume that Frank was also making it along. I don't know. It's just a show, etc.
Sure. He's just cooking with Julia Child while watching it. Yep.
He gets
Cocktail
very
making.
excited and wants to take part in whatever the bots are doing.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I don't know. I thought it was actually interesting that they did this cocktail sketch in a show where people are drinking alcohol the whole time, and they're making fun of that.
Yes.
And they put no alcohol into the drink.
Nope.
Presumably, I don't know why. I mean, like, perhaps because, Frank was in Alcoholics Anonymous and they didn't even want to, joke about that or something because he was going to be drinking it later. Or maybe they just thought, they don't have to. You can make this joke without actually involving alcohol in it and implying that they're drinking on the ship.
In fact, it's a better joke without it having alcohol in it, quite honestly, than it would have been if they were like, and then we'll put in gin, and then we'll put in vodka, and then we'll put in whiskey, and we'll just make a Long Island iced tea with, Captain Crunch on top?
I mean... Yeah,
No.
Maybe it's a better joke. It's true. It certainly allows them to avoid having to act drunk in a way that might have been unpleasant for them. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it works. It was just an interesting thing to notice. I didn't remember noticing it previous times I've watched this episode, but I haven't watched it for many a decade because I've seen the dogs. I've laughed about the dogs. I don't want to sit through the dark movie again, though I'm glad I did for this.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, for TV's Frank, way more appropriate that he has a zing pow sugar rush and then has an uber bellyache afterwards, right? That is far more in line with that character.
Exactly.
I appreciate that. And acting drunk, dude, everybody in that movie, they had 4 martinis in the span of 3 minutes, and they never acted drunk. They either have the most incredible tolerance ever, except for the guy that she was engaged to, who does act drunk at one point in time. But they're drinking so much alcohol, I feel like they should have been poisoning themselves or something.
I'm sure they were long term, but...
Oh my gosh, I was astonished. Astonished.
I mean, people did used to drink a lot more, and you do build up a tolerance, but it still seems like they was very excessive.
Yeah, but we're talking full martinis. Walk over to the bar, make a martini, drink it like a shot, walk over to the bar, pour another martini. Your drink looks like it's not full anymore. Pour another they had 4 or 5 martinis that they drank like they were shots in a very short period of time, and we're still having coherent conversations. I just watched that and I was just like, okay, there are things that are believable in this movie. Those Killer Shrews are more believable than that alcohol consumption. I'm just saying.
Speaking of shrews, I decided to do a little experiment. We spend a lot of time researching things for this show, and sometimes you just want to save some of that energy. And everybody's been talking about how clever ChatGPT is. And I thought, maybe I could get ChatGPT to write us this segment.
Oh.
So I did. Oh. And I'm going to share it with you. And I think we should just read through the little script that it wrote to open up this segment.
Okay, that sounds fantastic.
Okay. They decided to make it as if this was the entire episode, even when I told them not to. But here we go. Hello and welcome to It's Just a Show, the podcast where we take a closer look at every episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. I'm Chris.
And I'm Charlotte.
And today we're going to be discussing the episode in which they riff on the Killer Shrews.
That's right. And what better place to start than with the shrews themselves? Did you know that shrews are one of the smallest mammals in the world?
I did know that, Charlotte. In fact, the smallest shrew, the bumblebee bat, is about the size of a bumblebee.
Wow, that's tiny. But even though they're small, shrews are mighty hunters. They have to eat every few hours because their metabolism is so high, and they'll go after insects, worms, and even small rodents.
That's true. And interestingly, shrews have venomous saliva that they use to immobilize their prey.
That's right. And speaking of immobilizing prey, let's talk about how shrews have been depicted in media. There's that classic children's book, The Tale of Despero, where the main character is a brave little mouse who befriends a shrew named Roscuro.
And in the Redwall series, there's a character named Log-a-Log, who's a shrew chieftain.
But then there's the horror movie genre, where shrews are often depicted as vicious killers.
Right, in the Killer Shrews, the shrews are portrayed as giant, bloodthirsty monsters.
So let's set the record straight. Are shrews likely to kill humans in real life?
Well, no. While shrews are aggressive hunters, they're not interested in attacking anything larger than themselves. And they're not venomous to humans either.
So there you have it, folks. Shrews may be tiny and fierce, but they're not out to get us.
That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for listening to It's Just a Show. Tune in next time for more in-depth analysis of Mystery Science Theater 3000. See, it's just that easy.
Right? I can't believe that we bother scripting things, Chris. Let's just hire a robot.
I mean, we sound a lot more NPR/CBC if we do it that way.
That's so true. I should have put less inflection and less tone in what I was saying.
Well, you should have tried to have that very calm NPR way of speaking.
That's right, Chris. I should have.
That's right. I do have to issue a few corrections to a few things that ChatGPT may have gotten a little bit wrong. Did you catch any of them?
Well, the venomous part.
Go on.
I understand that shrews, in fact, are not venomous. And much like our movie is also incorrect, they can't suck in poison and then become venomous because of the consumption of poison. So I think that ChatGPT and the movie The Killer Shrews got that wrong.
Some shrews, not most of them, but some shrews are venomous.
What?
Not enough to kill a person in a single bite, but yeah, some of them are in fact venomous.
Wow. Go ChatGPT, but not the movie. The movie, they can't consume poison and become poisonous.
No, not as far as I know, no.
What else did it get wrong?
Well, you'd be surprised to hear this, but the bumblebee bat is not the world's smallest shrew. It's the world's smallest bat.
Yeah, it did seem weird that they were talking about a bat when we were talking about shrews.
Yeah. And Roscuro in Kate DeMille's 2003 children's book, The Tale of Despero, is not a shrew. He's a rat.
Oh.
Yeah. Also, Despero the mouse doesn't try to save Roscuro. Roscuro kidnaps a human princess and Despero saves her.
Oh.
As far as I can tell. I haven't read the book, but people seem to like it.
We have the book, but I've never read it.
Oh, Roscuro is short for chiaroscuro, which I think is nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, Log-a-Log isn't a character in Redwall. It's like a title, like chieftain or king.
Oh.
But it is the title of the leader of the shrews, so it's pretty close.
Well, at least they're getting something shrew inside of their description of Redwall. I was thinking of Wind in the Willows because they're like, oh, isn't there a shrew in that? And I'm like, no, it's not a shrew. It's a mole.
Yes.
One of the main characters in Wind in the Willows is a mole. And so, not as vicious, apparently, as the shrew.
So other than their ability to consume poisons, what did we learn about shrews from today's movie?
I learned that when they're the size of a dog, they can consume a human, like, really quickly. And it seems like they hunt in packs.
Yeah. So that's not true about shrews at all. Shrews are really solitary. They only hang out with each other if they're going to mate. Otherwise, they get real mean to each other. So they don't hunt in packs. They're thinking of dogs. Is what they're thinking of.
I mean, that makes sense considering that the part of the shrew was played by Fido, as you said.
We also learned that shrews only feed by the dark of the moon. by which they mean at night.
Yes.
Even though we also find that shrews must eat their own body weight every few hours or starve, and that shrews eat every 8 hours.
Yeah, you can't do both of those things, right?
Right. Eating all the time is more accurate. Shrews don't eat 3 times their body weight each day like the movie suggests, but they do eat up to 2 times their own weight, and they have very high metabolisms, and so they have to basically be eating constantly.
That sounds horrible, but also it sounds awesome.
I mean, do I live my life that way? Maybe.
You do not live your life that way.
I, like to eat every few hours.
Yeah, but you don't eat like 2 times your body weight every day.
No, not unless bagels have been delivered recently. What else? The movie tells us that they have birth cycles of 10 to 14 days. I don't know what they mean by birth cycles. But
I was thinking from every 10 to 14 days, a brand new litter can be born.
Yeah, it's close to that, but that's not quite right. It's more like 17 to 30 days, but a lot of them can get pregnant the next day.
Oh, that sounds awful.
It sounds exhausting.
Oh my gosh. Although, to be fair, Chris, I think at that point in time, they were talking about the shrew that they had already genetically altered. So
it's possible.
I think that when they were talking about it, I was just like, that's their genetically modified shrew that was like, super teeny tiny, and they had changed the metabolism. So I was assuming that was not necessarily going to be true for all shrews.
Yeah.
But I also didn't expect to learn about shrews from a movie called Killer Shrews. Maybe it's just me.
No, it's fair, but they really tried to teach us things about shrews, much of which was wrong.
Yeah.
They also talk about how these giant killer shrews are coming down from Alaska.
Oh.
They do mention this early on in the film, so that the giant killer shrews are coming down from Alaska and are spreading throughout the United States, implying that that's what's going to be the problem, even though that has nothing to do with what's happening here on this island in hurricane land, which is not the Alaska part of the country.
Alas, no.
And also these are genetically modified and local to the island itself. So
yeah.
What are they talking about?
I don't know. They're trying to solve the overpopulation problem. And it seems like, well, if there are killer shrews that are coming down from Alaska that are just going to eat all of us, problem solved. Am I right? How can we have overpopulation if shrews are killing us all?
That is certainly one solution, yes. How big do you think the largest shrew is?
Oh, I always think of the shrew as being a very small rodent, so no larger than a rat, so a few pounds?
I didn't write down pounds, I wrote down inches, but yeah, you're right. It's 6 inches, 15 centimeters for the Asian house shrew.
Does that include tail or is that just body?
That's a good question. And I don't remember the answer, although I saw a little picture of it. So, but either way, they don't get big enough to be the kind of threat they describe in the movie as Alaskan killer shrew.
I don't know, because I watched a YouTube video from National Geographic, which we know is a very reputable source of animal information. They had a battle to the death of a psycho shrew, like that was its name, versus a scorpion. And they referred to it as the, quote, perfect serial killer. And it was like an epic battle. Had these two things been robots, it would have been a better robot war than the movie Robot Wars. Just saying.
Wow.
It looked amazing, though. That shrew was taking out that scorpion like honey badger style. It was intense. They could take down humans if they hunted in packs. If they were like sentient, like a human intelligence, and they hunted in packs, dude, we would have no chance.
If only they unionized. So that's my information about shrews, I guess, in terms of the animals. But there's another meaning to the word shrew, which I thought was really interesting.
Oh, is this when they're talking about people?
Yeah. So what is shrew in terms of people?
Well, I mean, in the movie, they even reference the William Shakespeare play, The Taming of the Shrew.
Exactly.
So, and that character that they're referring to, the character of Catherine or Kate, she's horrible and mean and just nasty and angry all the time to everybody around them and just a generally unpleasant person. So The end, female. It's very important. Shrew is referring to a female that is like a angry, bitter hag. Fabulous, right?
Yeah. Here's an interesting thing. The term shrew for a person seems to predate the term shrew for the animal in English.
Oh, that's bizarre. So they named the animal after the behavior it was exhibiting that they had already described as shrew?
They might have. We're not 100% sure. The OED also agrees that it's remarkable that the animal sense of the word doesn't exist until the 16th century, even though the person sense of the word comes from about 1300 and started off potentially referring to a man or a woman, although it definitely became gendered pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It may also come from a Germanic word from the same word that we get shred, referring to sort of the gnawing or the snout or something like that. So it might just be that there's another word that emerged that was similar to the word shrew. But shrews, the animals, were thought to be aggressive and cruel and venomous and unpleasant, just like shrews, the people. So whether the description of a shrew as being shrewish came because the word was already being used in this other context, or if we just didn't write down that we were calling these animals shrew for a few hundred years, who knows?
Yeah. Who knows?
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 small dogs chasing you around barking about today's experiment, Killer Shrews. Go, Chris, go.
As Joel notes, The Killer Shrews was directed by Ray Kellogg, who also gave us The Giant Gila Monster, which they had riffed a few episodes prior, but Joel still wants to call them Gila Monsters. Anyway, despite an interest in oversized critters, Ray Kellogg was no Bert I. Gordon.
Besides the 2 films featured on MST3K, Kellogg is also known for The Green Berets, a heavy-handed 1968 film about the Vietnam War, starring John Wayne and David Jansen, who you might remember from Space Travelers or Superdome. Anyway, John Wayne was concerned about all the anti-war activism and wanted to make a pro-war film. The film did very well at the box office, despite the critics hating it.
The Killer Shrews was co-produced by Ken Curtis, who also plays Jerry the research assistant, in the love triangle with Anne. Curtis is best known for playing Fergus in Gunsmoke, but he also voiced Nutsy the Vulture in Disney's animated Robin Hood movie.
Captain Thorne is played by James Best, best known for playing the bumbling Sheriff Roscoe P. Coltrane. On the Dukes of Hazzard. I'm sure some of you knew this, but the Dukes of Hazzard, like MASH or Buffy the Vampire Slayer, was originally a film, but the film had the curious title Moonrunners.
Turns out, Moonrunners are moonshine runners, and that in the TV show, the Duke boys were on probation for illegally transporting moonshine, and that has something to do with why Boss Hogg is out to get him. Now, I watched a lot of the Dukes of Hazzard when I was a kid, and I don't remember any of this. As far as I can remember, it was a show about 2 guys who drove around in a car that they couldn't easily get in or out of.
Anne is played by Ingrid Good, who was Miss Sweden in 1956. She was cast despite having a noticeable Swedish accent. Anne even points out that Captain Thorne doesn't pay attention to the people around him. He hasn't even asked why she has such a distinct accent. And at the end of the film, he's still putting off asking her about it.
Anne's father Marlowe is played by Baruch Lumet, who was a notable actor in Yiddish theater, but not as notable as his son Sidney Lumet, who directed films like 12 Angry Men, Network, and the amazing Dog Day Afternoon.
As one of the scientists dangles a little shrew by its tail, Tom says,
The guy who taught LBJ how to hold dogs.
This refers to a famous photo of President Lyndon Baines Johnson at a press conference, holding up one of his beagles by the ears. LBJ, what are you doing, you freak? Hey everyone, let's learn how to hold an animal properly, okay?
Last episode, we talked about how the new season has very fresh riffs. Well, in this experiment, we get this moment.
Ren, Stimpy, no!
The Ren and Stimpy show premiered in August of 1991, and this experiment is from July of 1992. Only 6 episodes of Ren and Stimpy had aired at that point.
We awkwardly cut from a conversation to a frightened horse and get this riff.
Did you say Frau
Sail
Blucher?
with me tomorrow, whether you're fun intention.
Cloris Leachman plays the terrifying housekeeper Frau Blucher in the Mel Brooks film Young Frankenstein. Whenever her name is spoken, we hear the same sound effect of horses rearing up and whinnying in fright.
Trilling jokes are back.
Hey, who's trilling? Stop trilling out here. Lionel, stop trilling. Diana, stop trilling.
We mentioned Lionel Trilling when we covered the Trilling jokes in The Projected Man. Diana Trilling was Lionel's wife and a literary critic in her own right. And, like Calvin Trillin, she published a lot in The Nation. We'll link to a New Yorker article from a few years ago that reckoned with her legacy as a notable New York intellectual.
As our heroes head to the shore in metal barrels, Tom says,
Meanwhile, on the Merrimack here.
there have been many ships called the USS Merrimack, but the most famous was burned and sunk by Union forces during the Civil War to prevent the Confederates from having it.
But the Confederates hauled the remains of the Merrimack out of the water and fashioned it into a ram for the CSS Virginia. The Virginia then destroyed several Union ships during the Battle of Hampton Roads, in a fight that had tremendous ramifications for naval battle techniques. Or so I gather, I don't know. For more details, ask your local grandpa. He'll be happy to tell you all about it.
And that's time. I can't believe you got to mention naval battles inside of this episode. I mean, I never thought that would come up.
That's why we do this show.
No, it's totally true. That was a good tangent. But let's go to a super local tangent for me, if you don't mind.
Okay.
The short is all about rodeos.
It sure is.
And wow. When I was watching it, all I was having were like these really excellent flashbacks to my childhood. I grew up in Pacifica, California, and in Pacifica, when I was a kid in the early 80s, they had an annual rodeo. Now, Chris, you visited my parents' place inside of California.
Yeah, I've been to your ancestral home.
Do you think of that place as a place that would have a rodeo as a cow town?
I mean, it's most famous for having the only Taco Bell on the beach that surfers come out of the water in their wetsuits and run up and grab themselves a chimichanga and then snarf it down and head back into the water.
And that's not a terrible thing to be known for. Oh my gosh.
No, it's delightful, but it also doesn't scream out rodeo. Bay Area suburb and rodeo don't go together in my mind, but, you know, what do I know?
I mean, it's amazing how many towns inside of the San Francisco Bay Area do have like rural and agricultural roots. I mean, I believe Sonoma and Napa inside of that area, they probably still do have rodeos. And if you go further south, I don't know now because Silicon Valley has done a lot of building up of the area that's south of the Bay Area, kind of San Jose and going south. So they may not have rodeos anymore, but you know, Gilroy, where they had the Garlic Festival, and Monterey also have like very strong farming communities. And they could very well have competitions like the Junior Rodeo. And certainly 4-H is a huge thing inside of a lot of areas of the Bay Area.
Now, I just looked up cattle farms in the Bay Area, and the first result Google gave me is a place called Dharma Farms, which is a cow sanctuary and event space inspired by ancient wisdom in the heart of the San Francisco Bay Area. You see where I'm coming from. You're right. There are others.
Well, there used to be a dairy out of Berkeley called Berkeley Farms, and their tagline for it was "Cows in Berkeley, moo." Doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think.
And I see there's a place called the Bar None Ranches in Half Moon Bay, which is not too far away either.
Not at all. Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. There do seem to be cattle ranchers and therefore rodeos.
But not the kind kind of place that you would have expected it. And it was definitely one of those things that brought the whole town together. There was a short article inside of a newsletter that the Pacifica Historical Society puts out, which I'll send you a link for to include in the show notes, where they talked about the history of the rodeo and how it started. It was originally supposed to be like a July 4th rodeo, and then they ended up having something that they referred to as Frontier Days, where people would they would have a big parade that went down Lindemar Boulevard. I remember the parade, actually. We would actually walk down the hill that you couldn't bike down. You could walk down it, though. And down right there at the bottom of the hill on Lindemar Boulevard, you would watch the parade. And it was all like local floats, the things that you see inside of hometown parades, right? Floats from the local high schools, floats that are put on by local businesses, politicians waving from cars, the local rodeo princess or rodeo queen with her court on her horse would be, riding down inside of the whole thing. And of course, there would have to be a group of people at the back of the parade who were cleaning up the horse manure from the street so that when the parade was done, all of that was already taken care of and they could open up the street again. And so we would watch until that ended because a friend of mine's older brother was part of that crew that would clean up at the end. So we always waited so that yes, he was part of the Pooper Scooper troop. It was awesome. And then you would, after that, head on down to the Rock Quarry, which is where they had built a rodeo stadium, and there's huge hills, they're not huge, but big hills around it, and it's right by the ocean, and that's where we would all sit if you weren't inside of the stands where the rodeo was happening. And basically the rodeo looked a lot like what was happening inside of that video, right? Except there were some professional rodeo adults that would perform as well, but they would have local talent from, the Pacifica area and the surrounding Bay Area youth that would come and be a part of the competition.
So it was, at least in part, a junior rodeo, or there was a junior rodeo component to it.
Definitely, yes. And they definitely had a rodeo queen that they would crown. So there would be a competition where, young ladies would, they would submit something and they would be judged on their appearance and their personality, but also how many tickets they sold to the rodeo and their fundraising abilities. But, that was part of building the community.
Yeah. Huh. Did you watch these events with wonder in your little eyes and hope someday to be doing some of these rodeo antics?
I don't think that I ever wanted to be racing horses around barrels. Like they would do a race around barrels in a clover pattern. They also did the bucking. So that they did inside of the junior rodeo short. I never wanted to do that, but I like all good girls in the early 80s, I loved horses. And I wanted to be a horse girl.
Did you have the Trapper Keeper with the horse on it?
I entirely did have the Trapper Keeper, Lisa Frank, horse, stars in the eyes, big rainbows, all of it. Of course I did. I was in 4-H for like a hot minute. My father actually started a beekeeping group with our local 4-H that my sister was a part of for a longer period of time than I was ever in 4-H, but it was also one of the reasons why I joined Girl Scouts, because Girl Scouts also has like a really strong connection to horse riding and stables inside of the Bay Area, and I imagine nationwide, not just cookies.
We'll come back to that when we do our episode on the killer bees.
Ooh, that'll be so much fun.
But if your father didn't start a shrew keeping chapter of the 4-H club,
I'm very pleased. It was a very cool thing. But it was definitely one of those things where the rodeo was a focal point of the community for a small part of the year. And eventually they lost free access to the area where the rodeo was happening because it just caused too much damage to the rock quarry. And so the person who owned the rock quarry said, yeah, if you want to do this, you got to pay us huge amounts of money. And they weren't willing to do that. So they ended up transitioning from having a rodeo and Frontier Days to having the annual Fog Fest, which now happens in September. So if any of our listeners are inside of the the Bay Area and in Pacifica in late September, look out for the Pacifica Fog Fest. It's a lot of fun.
And a lot harder to lasso.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
So I grew up on the East Coast and did not have access to cattle farms and rodeos. And in many ways, this short might have been my first experience watching a rodeo. I don't know. Maybe there was some on TV. I don't remember anything about it, though.
I mean, now that we have ESPN 1 million, you can watch rodeos, I'm sure, on there at any time. But maybe it is more of a Western United States thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's wherever there are cattle farmers, I think. And they just aren't in New York City for some reason.
What? That seems strange.
I mean, there might be one boutique one in Brooklyn somewhere, but...
Stop.
But anyway, yes. So I saw this short and it's like, this is dangerous. I mean, Joel and the bots make a good argument about the fact that these kids are really, really putting their bodies in danger here by being thrown off horses onto, the dirt and so forth. That their spines might get shattered and their skulls might get concussed and so forth.
Very much so. Rodeo is a dangerous sport. It is, both for professionals and for amateurs. And there's a lot of safety precautions that they try to make as a part of the field.
Not in this short.
Not in this short. Well, this short is not filmed in the last 20 years.
No, exactly. But this is sort of what I'm thinking because, you have a kid who is about the age of some of the kids in this short. And if your kid wanted to be in the rodeo, would that terrify you? Because it would terrify me.
Yeah, there's no question. But it would also terrify me if he wanted to play football.
Yeah.
Right? Like any sport that you play is going to have some risk involved. There's no question. But yes, rodeos feel like an incredibly risky thing, especially if you've never had any experience inside of any of the events. Maybe from the inside, it's less risky than it looks like from the outside. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe if you start real young before all your bones are set and so forth, and you're just squishy and you can fly off it and get used to it, maybe it's all fine. But I don't know.
I mean, the 4-year-old does get up really quickly inside of this junior rodeo, right?
He does, and more power. He didn't fall that far, I guess, is part of it as well. Because they're just on little calves, just being flung around. I don't know. It's really upsetting to me, but it's not for me.
No, and really, it's a rodeo and there are sporting aspects to it, but there's also that aspect of the whole community coming together for an event and seeing all of the young people from the community, seeing other adults inside of the community and being able to celebrate what's happening inside of your cow town. I'm sure places that you've lived have had different kinds of celebrations. Maybe you didn't have rodeos, but you would have had something else that was your community gathering for the year.
Yeah, no, we had block parties for the block that we lived on, and if the church community might have its annual. I mean, we had square dancing sometimes.
Yes, I remember square dancing with your church. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, and you're right. There are other parts of the community gathering aspect of the event that were highlighted in the short that I quite liked, such as the making of posters. Joel's riff about.
Yes.
So here are 3 options that our design guys came up with. Let me know what you think.
That was so good.
I always loved that joke so much, and also because the posters are perfect for what they are and were not designed by children.
No, but they could have been designed by middle school age kids.
They were designed by adults pretending that they were designing things in the style of middle school kids.
Okay, yes, that's true.
and they nailed it. I loved it. Well, we have just a little bit more time left, so I wanted to bring up one little tiny extra thing, a little final, not much of a factoid, but just a little final aspect of the movie that I wanted to talk with you about.
Okay, Let's go.
One of the big things that happens in this movie is a hurricane.
Well, they talk a lot about a hurricane happening. I'll grant you that.
It doesn't get nearly as rainy as any of the hurricanes that I've been in got, but they do pretend like it is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you grew up, as we were just saying, on the West Coast, whereas I grew up on the East Coast. And the East Coast tends to get more hurricanes than the West Coast does.
It's entirely the case that I've never had to live through a hurricane. Have you?
Yeah, okay, that was what I was wondering, because I suspected you hadn't, but... Oh, interesting. I've been through a few of them.
Oh.
Yeah.
When you were as far north as New York City, or when you were in other places on the East Coast?
Both. I've been through hurricanes that passed through New York. I've been through hurricanes that passed through Connecticut. I've been through hurricanes. I was in Hurricane Andrew that passed through Florida and was...
Oh my gosh.
I have a really awkward story because, so I was in Tampa and we were heading back north to where we lived in New York on the day that Andrew was landing. And everybody was like, oh, prepare. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be terrible. And we're like, okay, we might have to stay later and figure stuff out. But it started raining and we thought, oh, this isn't so bad, actually. It was like in the movie. We could go out into it. And so we headed back north and drove north further and further away from the hurricane. And we were on the road, and this was well before the internet or cell phones or anything. So it wasn't until we got home 2 days later that we really found out just how bad that hurricane was.
Oh my gosh.
We spent the whole car ride being like, oh man, they were talking a big game about this hurricane, but wasn't that just a little piece of rain?
Oh my gosh.
And then we felt very bad about how confident we were that it was a nothing burger.
Yeah.
Not that the term nothing burger had been invented yet.
No. Wow. Wow. You guys indeed got incredibly lucky then. Because I mean, as I understand it from things I've seen on the news about hurricanes, they can be just devastating. Absolutely devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, they're only getting worse these days.
Fun times.
So don't make them like when I was a kid, when you could enjoy a hurricane properly and know that you were getting the first week of school off. And
wow.
But I did happen to get to stand in the eye of Hurricane Gloria as it passed over where I lived in Connecticut in 1985.
How does that work? Like, you watched it from inside of your home, and like, how did you know you were in the eye of the hurricane?
Because it stops raining.
Oh.
And the hurricane isn't over yet. The eye of the hurricane is absolutely calm. They describe it as being eerily calm, and I suppose it is. I was 10 at the time, so my sense of the sublime was really limited.
Sure.
But it was still nevertheless interesting to go outside for 10 minutes or whatever and sort of enjoy a bit of calm before heading back in and, hunkering down for a few more hours.
I can't imagine. Do hurricanes work like tornadoes where you want to get underground or get inside of a cellar? Do you have like a special place that you go to shelter for a hurricane?
Yes, you might. We were in a house that didn't have a basement, so we couldn't go into the basement. You basically want to crack open the windows. They talk about this in the movie. You want to crack open the windows because the pressure becomes quite different, and especially with old windows, they could crash and so forth. And that's like one of the real dangers if you're inside a house during a hurricane is shattered glass. Otherwise, you just want to make sure you have a lot of supplies. And if you have a sturdy enough house and it's not the sort of strongest hurricane in the world, or you're not the first people the hurricane is hitting once it hits ground, which where I was, it peters out. Hurricanes peter out as they go across land. So, if you're living in Florida, you're going to get a much worse experience than if you're living outside of Hartford. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that big a deal. It did knock down power lines, and it meant that, I started school that year a bit late as they tried to dry out the elementary school and get power back to it. It was exciting. I don't know. There was a lot of rain, like it could cause flooding.
Yeah.
The hurricane that hit New York was so flooded that like people were canoeing down our street. You've been to that house. You know where the street is. So.
Oh my gosh. I can't. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. They were like in a little inflatable raft sort of paddling down the street.
That must have been so weird.
Very surreal. Very surreal.
Wow.
Bunch of college kids doing that, of course, because that's the age when you do that during or after a hurricane.
Yes, because you have a raft and you're still just a wacky kid.
You have a raft and you don't have a rodeo. If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if your papa was a rodeo, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, or you can reach us on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you, and like our randomly selected supporter, Jessica. Thank you, Jessica. For as little as $1 an episode, you can be like Jessica and help us research and record this show, and you can even join us in a friendly Discord and listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything we mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/133.
Chris, speaking of spoiler alerts, I think you might have already told everybody what we're watching next time.
I didn't, because I'd completely forgotten that. I'd lined it up to be perfect like this. It's true. Next one we're going to be doing is Season 9, Episode 5, The Deadly Bees.
I know I haven't seen this one because Season 9 is a sci-fi era show. So anything I should know going in or that our listeners should know going in?
It's got bees in it.
Sweet.
Well, get all your beekeeper knowledge at the ready, and we will see you next time. But until then...
He's a brilliant man, but he saves his phlegm.
And the crowd goes wild. Yay! Take it away, Theme Squad.